1 minute ago, Jamie Foxx crushes Diddy in court after revealing the hidden tapes. Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. The following is a factual reenactment drawn from federal courtroom testimony and corroborated sources. This is not speculation. This is what happened behind doors that were never meant to open. Until now. It started not with a bang, but with a tremble. Jamie Foxx, beloved Oscar winner and industry powerhouse, stepped into the federal courtroom wearing a charcoal suit. But it wasn't the clothes that set the tone. It was his face. Hollowed, focused, haunted. There were no cameras, no photos. But the walls of that courtroom would soon echo with revelations that would rattle the entertainment world to its core. Foxx was not there to perform. This wasn't a role. He took the stand with a gaze locked straight ahead, bypassing reporters, bypassing Diddy himself. For the first time in years, he wasn't part of the Hollywood circle, he was standing against it. "I never wanted this," he began, his voice cracked, but clear. But silence is its own kind of prison. The courtroom leaned in. According to leaked notes from inner-city press and verified transcripts, Foxx's testimony detailed a chilling experience inside the mansion of Sean Diddy Combs, a night that would break the illusion of brotherhood forever. Foxx spoke of years of camaraderie, laughter on red carpets, inside jokes at award show, after parties, public photos that scream luxury and unity. But that, he said, was the mask. "I thought I was entering a palace of influence," he recalled. Turns out it was a theater of control. It was a particular evening, a night of opulent champagne and A-list faces that twisted the narrative. Jamie had accepted an invitation to stay the night. He'd been there before, but this time was different. Heavy drinking blurred the edges. Soft lighting melted into shadow. Then came the shift. They said Diddy had a surprise, Foxx testified. He was escorted into a soundproof theater. A screen was already cued. He didn't know what to expect. What followed left him shaken beyond repair. It was like being pulled underwater. You know something's wrong, but you can't breathe. Foxx described footage disturbing surreal, possibly staged, but terrifyingly real. The kind of material no one should witness. And he wasn't alone. People he didn't recognize sat silently around him, numb-frozen. He tried to leave. The doors were locked. The audience in the courtroom didn't move. Not a cough, not a whisper. "They told me everyone who's someone has been through this." Foxx paused, wiped his eyes, and continued. He didn't sleep that night. What haunted him more wasn't just the images, but what came after. A flash drive, delivered to his office with no sender. On it, grainy footage of him, watching, reacting. A final message flashed across the screen. "Just remember," Foxx said. The implication was clear. "You were seen. You are now owned." That's when it started. The decline? Calls stopped coming. Projects were shelved. Endorsements pulled out without explanation. He was being ghosted by an industry he helped build. And then came the NDA. 7 figures. A legal muzzle. "I didn't sign," Jamie said. "And that's when they turned the machine on me." One producer described it as black ice. You don't see it until you're already slipping. Foxx testified that the mansion wasn't just a party house. It was wired, monitored, digitally fortified. Hidden cameras in bedrooms, bathrooms, lounges. A vault of footage stored on a private server. Insurance leverage blackmail. People didn't know they were being recorded, he said. That's what made it powerful. That's what made it dangerous. He recounted how celebrities' big names had come to him in private. Crying, broken. They had tapes too. They couldn't speak. They were afraid. I'm not the only one. I'm just the first one to get this far. Court was adjourned early that day, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because the next morning, a former FBI agent walked into that courtroom. Not to testify, but to sit in the back row. Jamie noticed. Everyone noticed. And that's when the real unraveling began. The courtroom buzzed with a different kind of tension the next morning. Jamie Foxx returned to the stand, not with hesitation, but with something sharper in his eyes. Purpose. "This isn't just about me," he said. "This is about the whole system." He wasn't wrong. From the back of the room, the presence of the former FBI agent, unannounced, low profile, cast a long shadow. No one said his name, but everyone understood the implication higher powers were watching now. Foxx continued his testimony with a clarity that made the room lean forward. "I was shown something no guest was ever meant to see." He described being led down a corridor behind a hidden bookcase. At first, he thought it was just a quirky feature of a billionaire's mansion, until the hallway opened into a room full of monitors, cables, and silence. 2 men were stationed inside, unnamed, expressionless. They never spoke. They didn't need to. What he saw next confirmed everything. Live feeds, bedrooms, spa rooms, lounges, not party footage, surveillance. They wanted me to know they had everything, not just on me, on everyone. The screens showed people Jamie recognized, athletes, actors, politicians. This wasn't about memories, it was about leverage. He asked who had access to the files. The response was chilling. Only him. Meaning Diddy. The defense team objected, but the judge overruled. The jury stayed motionless. That night, Jamie was assigned a room far from the others. No windows, cameras in every corner, cold, sterile. Not a guest suite, an interrogation cell. He couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., he stepped out into the hallway. That's when he saw it. A procession of robed figures gliding silently toward the theater room. Some blindfolded, others holding drinks. He followed. From behind a crack in the door, he saw what he called the ritual. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't performance. They were filming everything. Handlers moved through the room, checking angles, whispering instructions. One man, not a guest, walked from group to group, ensuring the cameras rolled. At the center, Diddy, smiling. And then Jamie saw something that froze him. A woman with a notepad. She wasn't participating. She was observing. Recording. She noticed him, looked straight at him through the door. She smiled. Then slowly she shut the door. Jamie stepped back in shock. When he returned to his room, something had changed. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of him and Diddy, taken years ago, a symbol of their past. On the back of the frame, a handwritten word, brotherhood. Foxx lowered his voice. "I knew then, I wasn't just invited, I was drafted." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. What followed in the coming days was a coordinated storm. Foxx began receiving messages, some vague, others more direct. One morning, he found his phone replaced with a different device. Same model, same apps, but something felt off. Then came the call. Outside a restaurant in LA, 2 men in dark suits handed Jamie a phone. On the line, Diddy. "You good, my man?" the voice said calmly. Jamie didn't answer. "I hope you're not planning on saying anything you'll regret." The tone was smooth, friendly, but the implication, ice cold. That's the kind of thing that can mess up legacies. Jamie testified that he ended the call and went home in silence. But it was already too late. A day later, a tabloid ran a fabricated story implicating him in a scandal. No sources, no context. Just whispers. It was a warning, he said. A way of saying we can destroy you too. The courtroom shifted again, not just in emotion, in belief. This wasn't just a scandal. It was becoming something far more sinister, an orchestrated campaign of silence. And Foxx. He wasn't backing down. As the judge called for a recess, jurors whispered among themselves for the first time. The silence had cracked. And what came next would finally push the walls of Diddy's empire to their limits. The third day of testimony opened not with evidence, but with a question. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Jamie Foxx exhaled. "Because I was scared," he said. "Not for my career. For my life." He paused, glanced briefly toward the gallery, where Diddy sat impassive. You don't understand the reach this man has. The room held its breath. Foxx described the invisible machinery, how people who challenged Diddy didn't disappear in the physical sense. They disappeared from relevance, from headlines, from protection. You get iced out, he said. Quiet. Fast. Permanent. He wasn't speaking from theory. He cited names people in music and film who tried to push back. Lawsuits dismissed careers, quietly ended. A-list producers stopped returning calls. Streaming platforms pulled support. Stories planted in tabloids. A pattern. They don't need to kill you, he said. They just erase you. And then for the first time, he named others. 3 celebrities' names redacted in court documents, but hinted at through public whispers: a Grammy-winning rapper, a late-night host, and a well-known activist actress. They'd all been there, all filmed, all bound by the same unspoken code, but there was more. A flashback Foxx had kept to himself until now. A blackout. It was around 2 a.m. The lights in the mansion cut out. Music halted mid-beat. The air grew cold. Guests froze. It was like they knew the drill. A man in a black suit emerged and calmly directed guests to their rooms. No panic. Just precision. Jamie, uneasy, stepped into the hallway. He followed faint sounds, metal clanging muffled whispers, until he found a door slightly ajar. He peeked inside. Shadows. Figures in a circle. Someone being restrained. A woman moved calmly through the scene, writing in a small notebook. She turned, met Jamie's eyes, and smiled, then without a word closed the door. I knew right then, Jamie said, voice cracking. This wasn't a party. This was a stage, and we were all props. A ripple of horror ran through the jury, but Jamie wasn't done. He described the forbidden upstairs level of the mansion. Guests were warned not to go there. But one night, trying to find a bathroom, he opened the wrong door and found himself at the bottom of a staircase, lit only by red emergency lights. At the top, 2 men whispered. One saw him. You lost, the man asked coldly. Jamie backed away, but not before spotting something draped in a black sheet. Under it, blinking white lights. Evidence, he later called it. Secrets. Control. A friend later told him that floor was for meetings, the kind where people give up something to get something. That line haunted me for years. Foxx's testimony by now had transcended shock value. It had become a map of how power insulated itself, fed on fear, and grew stronger through silence. The prosecution seized the moment. They presented NDAs signed by dozens of guests at Diddy's estates. More than confidentiality, these documents included gag clauses, punitive damages, and vague morality language that functioned like invisible chains. Jamie had refused to sign, and that, he said, was the turning point. His projects were pulled, his calls stopped being returned, an action thriller he'd been developing vanished from studio slates, interviews canceled without explanation. His name began to disappear, not from scandal, but from opportunity. I wasn't blacklisted for what I did, he said. I was blacklisted for what I didn't agree to. By now, jurors no longer looked indifferent. They looked furious, and Jamie, for the first time, looked liberated. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth. With those words, he stepped down from the stand and walked straight past Diddy. Not a glance. Not a word. But the message was clear: I survived the machine. And now I'm taking it apart. The air inside the courtroom on day 4 was sharp electric even before anyone spoke. Because today wasn't just about one man's trauma. Today was about the system. The prosecution called its next witness, but Jamie Foxx remained the emotional anchor of the trial. Even off the stand, his presence loomed large, as if his testimony had opened a dam that could no longer be sealed. Prosecutors introduced digital forensics. An expert testified about metadata from anonymous flash drives, videos time-stamped, encoded, and linked back to IP addresses originating from private servers registered to shell companies. All of them, in turn, traced to properties owned by Combs Global. The tapes were real. One of the recordings, verified through facial recognition and location markers, showed Jamie in the theater room, his face caught in the grainy glow of hidden surveillance. No audio, just expression. And then black screen. Just remember. The courtroom shivered. But the most devastating revelation was still to come. A subpoenaed email thread recovered from a former assistant's encrypted phone outlined an operation within Diddy's inner circle. The thread referred to guest prep, secure zones, and asset assurance. One email included a bullet point: record leverage, classify threat tier, offer retainers or disruption. The term disruption was never defined. Another document showed NDAs cross-referenced with metadata from recorded events. Each guest had a file. Each guest had footage. And then came the headline moment, a subpoenaed, time-stamped logbook from the mansion's server room. It listed visitors, celebrities, executives, politicians. Jamie's name was there. So were others blacked out in court, but reportedly recognizable. One name, though, slipped through redaction briefly before the judge sealed it: a former U.S. president. A gasp swept through the gallery. The judge ordered immediate silence. Jamie's team didn't need to speak. The implication landed like a thunderclap. This wasn't just about celebrity. This was about infrastructure, an industrial network of blackmail. The FBI agent, now publicly named in the docket as Agent M, took the stand in a rare sealed session. Notes from that closed-door testimony leaked within hours. According to sources, Agent M had investigated Diddy for over a decade. Over 30 sealed complaints. None had reached trial. Why top-level protection? The agent reportedly said. People in places you wouldn't believe. Jamie's defense attorney later stated on record, this was never about one victim. This was about a machine that eats silence and spits out fear. Social media erupted. Jamie told the truth trended globally within hours. Celebrities who once posted photos with Diddy began deleting them. Studio executives released vague statements about reevaluating partnerships, and fans, many of whom had grown up with Diddy's music, felt betrayed. Not by a man. By a myth? Back in court, Jamie's demeanor changed. He was no longer the trembling witness. He was composed, poised, deadly clear. They told me this would ruin me, he said. But silence already did. He described the months after the mansion, the paranoia, the therapy, the avoidance. How he couldn't walk into a room without wondering if a lens was watching. They don't just collect secrets, he said. They manufacture silence. One of the jurors, a woman in her 50s, wiped her eyes. The media swarmed outside the courthouse. News anchors didn't know how to frame it. Was this Hollywood's darkest secret? Or a glimpse into something even more terrifying, an elite culture of power that not only protects predators, but arms them? The final exhibit for the day was a note. Handwritten. Found taped to the inside of a vault door. Some things are better kept buried, until they aren't. The courtroom didn't gasp this time. It listened, because the silence was no longer fearful. It was reckoning. Day 5 didn't begin with fireworks. It began with a silence so still, it felt scripted. Reporters lining the courthouse steps said it resembled a scene from a film. But inside, it was real. And final. Jamie Foxx arrived with private security. His face calm, determined. As if the weight of the last 4 days had crystallized into something solid, unshakable. Inside, the court prepared for closing statements. But before that, Jamie had requested one final opportunity. Permission granted. He stood, walked to the witness stand, not as a victim, but as a man with unfinished business. His voice was low. Everyone thinks Hollywood is built on dreams, he said, but it's built on secrets. He recounted a final visit one he hadn't yet disclosed. Months after the incident, he was approached not by threats, but by persuasion. A senior executive, a friendly face, a quiet dinner. "You've said enough," the man had told him. "Let this go." Jamie asked why. Because it doesn't just stop with him. Foxx turned back to the court. "That's when I knew. I wasn't just up against a man. I was up against a machine." He paused. Let the words sink in. "They tried to break me with silence. I broke the silence instead." As he returned to his seat, murmurs rippled across the gallery. Even jurors glanced at one another. The room had changed. So had the story. Prosecutors gave their final statement a blunt surgical dismantling of the defense's narrative. They laid it bare: the tapes, the NDAs, the encrypted archives, the testimonies, the disappearance of staff, the private server logs, the manufactured stories, the sudden career blackouts. This wasn't coincidence. This was architecture. Design. This isn't just scandal, the prosecutor said. It's systemic manipulation. Weaponized power. When the defense spoke, they leaned on ambiguity. No direct denial, just doubt. They painted Foxx as emotional, suggestible, even paranoid. But the courtroom wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Outside, protesters gathered. Survivors from past scandals held signs. Hashtags multiplied. Even some celebrities cautiously posted vague messages of solidarity. Then came the verdict. Not from the jury. Not yet. But from the culture. Studios began dropping partnerships with Combs-affiliated ventures. Brands suspended deals. An internal investigation at a major label was leaked. Whispers became waves. And Jamie, he released a statement. Not to media. Not to Twitter. To the survivors. "If you've ever been silenced, know this: your truth matters. Mine almost drowned me. But when I spoke it, I found the shore." By the end of the week, the Department of Justice announced a new task force. Special focus: digital blackmail, non-consensual surveillance, and coercion in high-profile industries. Jamie wasn't just a witness anymore. He was a catalyst. Back in court, the jury deliberated. The charges were many. Some complex. Some clear-cut. But as they returned to the room, all eyes turned to one man. Sean Diddy Combs sat still, expressionless. For the first time, the room wasn't revolving around him. It was closing in. The foreperson stood. On the charge of unlawful surveillance, guilty. On the charge of coercion via blackmail, materials, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. Gasps erupted. One juror cried. And Jamie Foxx. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He closed his eyes. Not for victory, for peace. Outside, the crowd erupted. Inside, the judge prepared sentencing. But the real sentence had already begun. Not in years, not in fines, in legacy. Diddy's empire didn't collapse with a scandal. It collapsed under the weight of the secrets it tried to bury. Jamie's final quote echoed across screens that night, across articles and documentaries to come. "They wanted to erase me. Instead, I became the story." And the silence, it broke. For good